Welcome to Keepers. I'm Matt Ufford, and this is the fantasy football show for people who sat Doug Martin, the rookie who's gone from sleeper to overrated to bust to fantasy god in the span of 3 months. Fantasy owners are cruel and finicky people, and we deserve everything bad that happens to us. Let's go to starts and sits for Week 10. Start Michael Turner. Anyone who's watched him play can tell you that he looks slow and ineffective. Doesn't matter. The Saints allow 177 yards rushing every week, worst in the league. New Orleans is a fantasy football charity, and you should take that handout. Sit Fred Jackson. After Sunday's game, both Chan Gailey and Ryan Fitzpatrick said they need to find a way to get C.J. Spiller the ball more often. Translation, fewer touches for Jackson. Give Spiller a start this week and put Fred on your bench. Start Emmanuel Sanders. He's only owned in 2% of NFL.com leagues, which makes him a nice free agent pickup for a home game against the Chiefs. With Antonio Brown out, Sanders should enjoy the benefits of Mike Wallace getting double covered. Start Reggie Bush. Since his monster Week 2 performance, Bush has averaged just 47 yards per game on the ground. But even with Daniel Thomas cutting into his carries, I like Bush's matchup against the Titans, who have the 30th ranked rush defense. Sit Matt Schaub and Jay Cutler. The battle of 7-1 teams features 2 defenses who put the lockdown on opposing QBs. Neither signal caller is worth a start this week, especially Cutler and his stupid face. Start Ryan Fitzpatrick. Mr. Fancy Pants Harvard grad has thrown for 300 yards in each of his last 3 outings against the Patriots, who are giving up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. Add in their 4th worst performance against tight ends, and Scott Chandler's worth a start too. And finally, sit your Jets receivers. You have to be pretty desperate to start Jeremy Curley or Stephen Hill even on a good week, and this is not a good week. The Seahawks have allowed just 2 receivers to break the 100-yard mark all season, and those guys had Tom Brady and Matt Stafford throwing to them. Now, sit down. This may come as a shock, but Mark Sanchez is not quite as good as Brady or Stafford. It's a bold sports take for you right there. If any of this sounds suspect, well, let's review my record in the reality check. Last week was up and down for me. My big miss was on Chris Johnson, but if he hadn't broken that 80-yard garbage time TD, he would have finished with just 60 yards and 2 lost fumbles. Chris Johnson is Satan. On the plus side, I predicted the return of Brian Hartline, 8 catches for 107 yards, and I said that Brandon Myers was a better play than Jacob Tamme. Myers led all NFL players with 13 targets in Week 9, catching 8 of them for 59 yards and 2 scores, while Tamme finished with just 18 yards. You're welcome. Next up, let's go to the trading block. Buy low on Carson Palmer. Okay, so he's not going to throw the ball 60 times every week, but the Raiders' injuries at running back will have Palmer throwing more than usual, making him worth a play against favorable matchups. Sell high on Calvin Johnson. I've preached patience with Megatron this season, but now I'm not so sure. With a nagging knee problem and a nasty run of opponents ahead, Johnson could face a late season shutdown if the Lions fall out of playoff contention. His 7-catch, 129-yard performance against the Jags gives you a great chance to flip him. Buy low on Dustin Keller. The Jets' tight end had 14 catches for 180 and a score over the 2 games going into the bye. He's got a bad matchup against the Seahawks, but the Jets' schedule is soft down the stretch. Jacksonville, Tennessee, and San Diego, weeks 14 through 16. Perfect for a playoff run. And sell on Lance Moore. With the return of Jimmy Graham, Moore saw only 2 targets against the Eagles, so it looks like he's going back to being the boomer-bust deep threat for the Saints. I'd try to acquire a steadier option in his place. Now let's go to Isaac, a tender man, for a tough weather report.
Matt, the San Diego Chargers are traveling to Tampa Bay to face the good old Buccaneers this Sunday. It's gonna be highs of 70 degrees with 0% chance of precipitation. It's gonna be a real beautiful day there. Clothing options could include flippity flops and cut-off jeans. And guess what? Shirts are optional. What a paradise on earth it's going to be in Tampa Bay this Sunday. Back to you, Matt.
These 2 are the same!
Ah!
Thanks, Isaac. This week's Hire and Fire gives love to the Colts. Hire T.Y. Hilton and fire Anquan Bolden. Hilton's a solid play in deep leagues and will continue to be as long as Donnie Avery's hip is banged up. Hilton got more targets last week than Reggie Wayne. Though that isn't going to happen every week, it's obvious that Andrew Luck trusts him to make plays. As for Bolden, what has he done for you lately? He has 100-yard game all season, and his only touchdown came in Week 1. I mean, it's great if you want 7 points, but I'd rather have a guy who gets red zone targets. Hire Vick Ballard and fire Pierre Thomas. With Donald Brown likely out, Ballard will get most of the carries against the Jags defense that gives up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. Thomas, on the other hand, was supposed to have increased value with Darren Sproles out, but he got fewer carries than Mark Ingram and Chris Ivory last week. Even with the matchup against the Falcons' soft run D, I wouldn't want to bet on Thomas getting red zone touches. Hire Dwayne Allen and fire Brandon Pettigrew. With Kobe Fleener out, Allen got 75 yards on 6 catches last Sunday. As long as he isn't splitting targets with Fleener, he's worth a play, especially against the Jags on Thursday night. As for Pettigrew, he shares targets with Tony Scheffler and hasn't seen the end zone since week 2. With Titus Young and Ryan Broyles emerging as worthy options for Matt Stafford, Pettigrew's role in the offense has a low ceiling. That's it for this week's episode of Keepers, your outdoor activity of the week, volunteering to help Hurricane Sandy victims. Sorry that's not a joke, I just thought you might want to do something nice for once. Set your lineups. See you next week.